All right. People can definitely jump in as they join, but let's go ahead and get started. So the reason I wanted to do a webinar on this topic is it's because it's been coming up a lot lately. I've received inquiries from 3 people in the 3 weeks prior to deciding to set up this webinar. So when that happens, there are probably 10 other people who are dealing with a similar issue. And so I wanted to make sure that the information that I'm sharing with those people gets out to uh, a larger population, because it seems to be something that's cropping up again and again. And what I'm hearing from people is I need help setting up boundaries because I'm in a toxic work environment. Right? This is what I hear. So what I want to do is talk to you today about why on earth you would even set up boundaries in the first place, and then what a boundary is and isn't. These are very, very important distinctions. A lot of people are throwing this term around, and I don't think they have a real appreciation for what a boundary is. And when I explain it, sometimes people totally back off. So I think that's kind of an interesting outcome. When I explain what a boundary is, suddenly people start to backpedal a little bit because they have a deeper appreciation for what this is, and how to set one, and what you need to be prepared to do to actually implement one well. And then I want to talk about how to put it into practice. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with me, my name is Nicole Coustier. I'm the founder of Aurelian Coaching. So I'm a career strategist and a certified life coach. And I've been doing this for a few years now. I have a long history in kind of corporate America. So I started out in infectious disease. So I worked for the government for a little bit, and then I moved into industry and med tech. I did a lot of policy work with the government in the DC area. So I've kind of, done a lot of things. I've always been healthcare and life sciences adjacent, tech adjacent. But a lot of what my job was managing people and managing teams. And a lot of the natural leadership development that kind of came out of that corporate experience, when I was ready to leave corporate, it just seemed like a natural transition to start my own firm and do the career strategy, the leadership development, and the life coaching was just kind of a natural parallel there. So that's where I'm coming from. And I've genuinely enjoyed helping people be smarter about their careers and their jobs. And really what it comes down to is how to make really good decisions. Like if I say I'm a career strategist and life coach, but really I just help people make better decisions. That's what people leave my coaching sessions really prepared and confident to do. Okay, so what about boundaries? The first thing that I want to clarify before we get into all the details about boundaries is I need to set the stage for the conditions under which we should be talking about boundaries in the workplace. So I want to talk about employee-employer, the contractual relationship. Okay, a lot of people talk about boundaries in their personal lives, but in the workplace, it's a little bit interesting because there is an employment contract, right? The employer sets expectations. Basically, there are duties and responsibilities for that position. And then the employee agrees to fulfill those duties and responsibilities and get a paycheck and get benefits as a result, right? So this is a contractual relationship that, for the most part, maybe there are exceptions, but for the most part does not exist in our personal lives, right? So it's very important to, when you're talking about boundaries in the workplace, you need to first acknowledge that there's a quid pro quo in the workplace. There is a contract, right? You agree to do this and you get this as a result. And if you don't do this, right, there are consequences of not meeting those expectations and fulfilling those duties and responsibilities, right? So that in and of itself needs to be acknowledged. So when people are talking about boundaries, I always want to first make sure that you start with, what did you agree to do? As part of signing up for this job, right, in this company or organization, and with this boss, there is an agreement. You have to acknowledge that agreement first before you start talking about boundaries and violations and like all this other stuff and toxic work environments. Look, first, there's a contractual agreement. You need to acknowledge that before you start talking about where there might be some violations. Okay. Okay. The other thing that I want to talk about first is, now we're getting into what a boundary is, and it's really important to talk about what it's not first. Okay. A lot of times when people come to me and say, I need help setting up boundaries in a toxic workplace, their motivation is often coming from the standpoint of, I want other people to stop doing something, or I want other people to start doing something. Okay. If that is the underlying motivation, I have bad news for you, my friend. That's not you. First of all, okay, you know that you can't control other people, right? You know you can't control them. Okay. People are going to people. All right. So I understand that the initial motivation is, there's something in a relationship that is not working for you. Okay. But a boundary is about you. It's not about the other person. A boundary is something that you implement knowing full well the other person may not change at all. The other person can do whatever they want to do. You can't control them. They're going to make their decisions. And you can set up a boundary to protect yourself, and to protect your job. If you are coming at this saying, I want to set up a boundary so that they change, that is not a boundary. That is manipulation, right? If you come to me and say, I want to learn how to set up a boundary because I am good at this stuff, but not good at that stuff, and I'm being asked to do the stuff that I'm not good at doing, not a boundary. Go back to the employment contract. What are your duties and responsibilities? You don't set up boundaries in order to facilitate a discussion with your manager about adjusting your job duties. Some people come to me and they say, I need help setting up boundaries because my coworkers are driving me crazy. No, this is not about preferences. Okay. So boundaries have nothing to do with changing other people. This is not about manipulation. This is not about adjusting your job duties that you may or may not like. And it's not about just preferences. I would really like it if. I would prefer if. Wouldn't it be really great if? No. Boundaries are pretty serious things. Okay. So let's talk about healthy boundaries. If all of those things are not boundaries, right? And, I'd say 90% of the time when people come to me about this stuff, it's something in that category of, oh, I really wish things were different. I really wish other people were different. But really, healthy boundaries is about protection. It acknowledges that you can control people 0% of the time. It acknowledges that the only thing you can control 100% of is you. So when you are finally at the point where you want to set up healthy boundaries, it's a beautiful thing. It is so beautiful because you're coming at it from a very, very healthy mindset. You know full well you can't manipulate the other person, and you know full well that you have 100% control of what you can do for yourself. This is a beautiful place to be. It's a beautiful place. It promotes responsibility and accountability, right? You accept 100% of the accountability for how you show up, how you behave, and you relinquish any expectation that you can control other people. That's beautiful. It empowers you. It empowers you. You can draw a little circle around yourself, right? This is how I show up. This is how I behave. This is how I respond. And it has nothing to do with cutting down another person. Because again, you can't control them, right? This is about protecting and loving yourself, right? Empowering yourself. And if you're doing that the right way, you don't cut down another person to buoy yourself up, right? And surprisingly, when people come to the place of implementing a boundary in the right way, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, when they do it in the right way, something amazing happens. I don't think I've ever seen an exception to this, and this will probably surprise you. But what ends up happening is that relationships improve. Relationships in the workplace improve when you set boundaries. A lot of people are surprised by this because when they find out what it takes to set a boundary, they're actually afraid that it'll rock the boat, cause a lot of disruption, make a lot of people angry and resentful, actually tear down relationships. What ends up happening is the opposite. It's a fascinating phenomenon. Like when you show up in love for yourself, right? Full accountability to yourself, and you're setting a boundary. There's something in that other people recognize and respond positively to. Okay. So it's a very interesting and unexpected outcome when you're setting healthy boundaries. You're actually moving away from toxicity. You're actually building better, healthier, closer relationships when you come across a situation that actually requires setting a boundary and you do it the right way. Okay. So boundary violations, this, I was talking earlier about how it's not trying to control the other person, and it's not about, uh, preferences, right? Not just about preferences. So what the heck is a boundary violation in the first place? It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Having to set a boundary is a really big deal because what it means is that another party is encroaching on your personal or physical space. And the consequence of their behavior is that it is truly preventing you from doing your job. Whatever they are doing means that you cannot fulfill the duties and responsibilities of your position. When you think about that, right? those are pretty high bars, right? That, you know, boundary violations are probably pretty far and few between when you think about it, right? Because it's not something that has to do with preferences. This is really, something harmful. It's harmful to you, and it means that you need to protect yourself. You can't control the other person, but now you have to set a boundary because when it's being violated, it is harming you. It's encroaching on your personal physical space, or it is threatening your job because you can't actually perform. You can't fulfill your duties and responsibilities. So this is a big deal. It's no small thing. Okay, so let me give you some compare and contrast here. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you are going to find a list of things that people have actually told me. People have said to me, these are the things that I'm experiencing and the reasons I need to set boundaries in the workplace. Help me. Only problem is that these aren't boundary issues. They're just not. But to provide a contrast, on the right side of the screen, I provide an alternative for a similar situation that I believe truly is a boundary issue and a boundary violation. Okay, so on the left-hand side, I really wish my coworkers would communicate the way I communicate. You know, there are communication issues in the workplace. Okay, we're talking past each other. Yeah, that's not a violation. That's not. You need to work with them in order to find some common ground in communication methods and styles, and maybe you need to work out semantics. Okay, but that's not a violation. Okay. Now, in contrast, if you were to tell me that I have coworkers who talk so loudly in an open workspace, right? So it's not, we don't have offices, it's cubicle land, I can hear everything. They're talking really loudly, and it's not even about work-related stuff. And almost 100% of my job is being on the phone. I cannot create a professional environment for my outbound sales calls with all of this going on. Okay, now it's different, right? Now it's different because what's happening is you are actually being prevented from executing on your job duties. Okay, now we can start to talk about how to set up boundaries in the workplace. Okay, here's another example. I've had people say, I'm not getting along with my boss. I'm not getting along with my boss. I wish my boss were more blank. I wish my boss were less blank. Okay. Here I put understanding was the comment that somebody made to me. I would like my boss to be more understanding. Yeah, so would we all. So would we all. This is human nature stuff, right? This is you put random people in a room together, and yeah, of course you wish the other person could be a little bit different, right, to make it easier for you to work with them. But again, this is not about preferences. In contrast, if someone were to say, my boss is using demeaning language about me and my personal life and my situation. Okay. I'm a single mom. My boss is using derogatory language toward me. That is unacceptable. That is a personal attack. I have a personal boundary. They are encroaching on a personal boundary, and that is unacceptable. Okay. Totally different, right? Now we need to talk about boundaries here. But gosh, if you really wish your boss would just be more understanding and give you more flex time or whatever that is, that's different. You got to work that out separately with your boss. That doesn't constitute a boundary issue. Okay. I have a third example. this is an interesting one. I want to have fewer meetings so I can get through my task list. This is something where people are, we're just busy. We're crazy, crazy busy. We have a to-do list a mile long, right? We're getting requests and, we're from multiple parties. We're putting out fires over here. You may have planned your day perfectly, and then you get into the office and then like a million things show up that you didn't anticipate, right? They came out of nowhere. And now your task list, forget about it. Your whole schedule is, crazy. It's completely irrelevant now, right? And the idea that people come to me with is I need to learn how to say no to people. Maybe, right? But I'm not sure that that's a boundary related issue, right? If all of those things that you're being asked to do, if everything on your task list is part of your duties and responsibilities, I'm not sure it's a boundary issue, but it sucks, right? I mean, there are just some aspects of the job that kind of suck, right? And it's really unfortunate that this is a work environment, right, that has these challenges. But I don't know that it's a boundary issue. In contrast, and this is something that happened to me when I reached a certain level, is I had clients who were so demanding that if I were in another meeting, they would call and demand that my executive assistant pull me out of whatever meeting I was in to deal with their issue. Okay, you know what? That's a no. That's a no. Okay. At that point, what's happening is it's disrupting my performance. I cannot be effective, right, if I'm being pulled out of meetings to answer a question that can wait 10 minutes. So that's where I personally created a boundary. And I had to tell my client, that's not going to happen. Okay. I'm not going to be pulled out of meetings. And my assistant has been instructed to tell you no, and she'll call you back when she's done in 10 minutes. Okay. That type of behavior actually prevented me from doing my job and fulfilling my duties at that level. So that had to be a hard no. Okay. So hopefully this comparison, these contrasts help to solidify the difference between trying to get other people to act right, which you're never going to be able to do anyway, and your preferences, what you would really like to have happen, versus personal, physical boundary violations that require a boundary strategy to address. Okay. So let's talk about how to set a boundary. Now that you know what's involved, right? You know it's no joke, right? This isn't something to do lightly, right? If you really find yourself on the job in a situation that is a violation, it's encroachment on your personal and physical space, and you are being prevented from doing your job. Okay. Here's how you set a boundary. There are 4 aspects to this. 4. And I will tell you this, all 4 need to be implemented in order for you to have set up a boundary for real. Okay, so let's go through these. Okay. Number 1, determine what the boundaries are. I used to skip this. I used to skip it. I would start at number 2 until I found out that people don't know. You don't know what your boundaries are. You may feel there's something wrong about this situation. There's something I don't like. There is something that is, preventing me from being in my happy place here on the job. But it is so important to stop, and for yourself, you have to define what the violation actually is. Where is that boundary? If you had to draw the line, where the heck is the line? It's not enough to say a boundary's been violated. No, you have to define the boundary. This is not necessarily an easy thing, but it is critical. It is absolutely critical. You have to go through the exercise of asking yourself, okay, I don't feel good about this, but what the heck is my boundary here? You have to define it, okay? It's very important because of number two. Number two, if you're going to set up a boundary, here's the thing. You need to actually communicate it to somebody. If you don't have a really crystal clear idea of where that line is, so coming right up to your line, whatever other people might do or other people might say, not yet crossing a boundary, and then they do something or say something that does cross that boundary, you have to know what that line is, and because you're going to have to communicate it to them. When they cross that boundary, you have to say, I have a boundary there, and you've just crossed it. Let me explain where that boundary is. Okay. A lot of times, this is probably the biggest thing where people start to back off. They come to me and they're like, I need to create boundaries. I have a toxic workspace. And then I tell them, yeah, you have to tell people that. You have to tell people what the boundary is when they cross it. And then people are like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to do that, right? It's crazy. Yeah. People are like, they're running around thinking about, I'm creating boundaries all of, and they never communicate it to the other party. The other party needs to know that there is a boundary there in the first place. Listen, if you communicate where you have a boundary, the vast majority of the time, you don't actually have to go through the rest of this. You don't. Especially when you're communicating that it is encroachment on your physical and personal space, and that it is actually preventing you from executing on your job duties. It is a threat to the role that you play on the job. Listen, if you can communicate that to somebody, right? This is serious stuff. It's serious stuff. And when people are hearing from you that this is not like a rinky-dink, I really like it if you did this. It's not just about preferences. This is really a serious thing. People respect it. People respect it. Okay. I'm not saying that there aren't exceptions to that. Sure. You can tell me all the times you might have tried to implement boundaries and like people said, screw that, I'm going to do whatever I want to do anyway. But see, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. They're going to do what they're going to do anyway, right? So you first have to communicate, this is a boundary, you have just crossed it. Okay. Now, the third thing is you have to tell them, so what? You have to say, this boundary is crossed. You don't give them a consequence that first time, because listen, they didn't know it was a boundary for you. They had no idea. They're just being how they are, right? But when you communicate the seriousness of this, you've just violated a boundary of mine. Here's what it is. They don't need to suffer consequences that first time, because you have to tell them. Now, the third step is then you say, if it happens again, Okay. If that boundary of mine, now that you know what it is, if you cross it again, this is what I will do to protect myself, right? Be very careful here. This is not a threat. This is not manipulation. This has to come purely from a love of self and for protection. I'm here to protect my physical and personal space. I am here to protect my job. Okay. And so if that boundary is violated again, here's what I'm going to have to do. Okay. This is also a big deal. This is a big deal because if you agree that there is a boundary that you have and you know what that is, and you're prepared to communicate it, now you have to come up with, well, what am I going to do? What am I prepared to do to protect myself? And that is not necessarily an easy thing to come up with, especially on the job. Oh, that's hard, right? What are you prepared to do on the job to protect your job? I don't know. That's a tricky situation. But again, it's so important to be prepared to state the consequence of that boundary violation. Not something you're going to do to them, right? Not something that's going to happen that they're going to feel the effects of it. No, it is something that you have to do to take care of yourself. What is that going to be? Right? What an interesting exercise to think through that. Okay, number 4. This is the one that if people don't back off at communicating with other people, this is the thing where the other step where people sometimes back off of boundaries, and that is that you have to follow through. You have to do the thing you said that you were going to do the next time that boundary is violated. Oh, yeah, because if you don't follow through, you know what happens? You're a liar. Oh, that's so harsh. That's so harsh, right? Yeah. Yeah, you're basically a liar. Okay. So you need to follow through. Okay. So sometimes it's so easy to be in a situation where it's like, well, if I communicate it to them and I state what's going to happen, maybe it's serious enough where they're going to back off and I don't have to actually do anything. Listen, 4 steps to setting up a boundary. Okay. If you do 1, 2, or 3 steps, you are not setting a boundary. If you aren't prepared fully to follow through on what you said you would do to protect yourself, I promise you it's not a boundary, and it's an idle threat. It's an idle threat, and you're making a liar out of yourself. Don't do it. Okay? You have to be prepared to do all 4 of these things. This is heavy stuff, guys. This is heavy stuff, but it's so important. All the other stuff that's not a boundary, you know what? You just need to work through it. You need to work through it. Get a career coach. Okay, so here are my truth bombs. The other party gets to behave exactly how they want to behave. Yeah, a lot of people say, no, they don't. Nope, nobody gets to behave any way they want to behave. I promise you it happens. Everybody gets to behave however you may not like it. You may set up a boundary, but that doesn't make this any less true. Everybody gets to behave exactly the way they want to behave. It's just the truth. Okay? Now, you have to be prepared to do all 4 steps of the boundary in order to actually have a boundary, right? Otherwise, you're just a liar. You're just throwing out idle threats, right? And you have to, be honest with yourself. Check in with yourself deep down. whether your motivation here is just to manipulate the other party and get them to behave differently. Because if that's the case, you need to do some other work. Boundary is not going to solve that problem. Okay. Now, if you aren't prepared to do all four parts, I'm just repeating here, what you're engaging in is emotional manipulation and threatening behavior, not a boundary. And the last one is, if you determine exactly where your boundaries are and you can define those really well and you communicate effectively, if you do steps 1 and 2, the vast majority of the time, a boundary isn't even necessary to execute on. When you communicate to another party the seriousness of how their behavior is impacting you and your job, you'd be surprised. Communication solves a lot. You need to be brave to communicate. That's true. You need to be brave. And you need to be prepared that the other person is not going to listen to what you say. Now, my experience is that they actually do. My experience is that they do. But you can't bank on that. You can't bank on it. You have to be prepared to follow through if necessary. Okay? All right, guys. Here, let's do a little bit of a quiz. What do you say? Okay, these are examples. Boundary violations or not. Work style is one that I hear. What if you work better alone compared to in teams? You really don't want to work in teams, or flip it. You love working on teams and you hate working all alone. Okay. And you're not as effective in your job if you have to work alone, whatever direction you want to take this in. Is that a boundary violation? No. No. Look at the employment contract. Look at your duties and responsibilities. Look at what you signed up for. Okay. You know full well you have to work in teams. You know, that job might not be a good fit for you, but it doesn't mean that working in a team is some encroachment on your physical and personal space. No way. Not a boundary, my friend. Okay. What about volume of work? What if you can't get to everything because you have too much to do? Yeah, not a boundary violation, right? It sucks. It sucks that you have so much work to do, right? Now, I can think of other ways where a boundary might come into play. So for example, if your boss is asking you to do things that are not part of your job description, okay, now we start to talk, but I'm not sure you implement a boundary. First, you have to have a conversation with your boss. These are my duties and responsibilities. Here are the other things that I'm being asked to do. And as a result of those things, I can't actually execute on my duties and responsibilities. So let's have a conversation. Do we need to change my job description? Do we need to expand it? Do I need, what are the resulting discussions? Talk about it, right? But I don't know that that's a boundary, that you may just need to work through those things. Okay. What about your your environment? What about if you can't stand your coworkers and you just find them terribly obnoxious, right? You hate going to work, basically. It's like, you really don't like somebody. You're offended. You're offended by them and what they say. Listen, you may work with people who don't have the same communication style, the same work style, the same background, the same race or culture, all of those things, maybe to the same politics. Maybe they have very, very different politics and they're vocalizing those politics that are very, very different from yours. Guys, it's not a boundary violation. It's not, right? Now, if they are making a personal attack on you, They're threatening you somehow. Okay. Now a line has to be drawn, right? But just because they're so different from you and you find them totally obnoxious, I'm not sure. That's just really unfortunate. Okay. I think you need to find another job is what needs to happen there. I'm not sure that you need to set up these boundaries. Now, that being said, okay, in all of these examples, there might be extremes. Maybe you're dealing with an extreme scenario that has to do with work style or volume of work or your work environment. Okay, fine. Let's talk about that, right? But go back to what I talked about in terms of what boundaries are and are not, right? Investigate your own motivations. Are you trying to change other people? Or do you fully accept and acknowledge that people are just going to people and you can protect yourself here? Now those boundaries might be appropriate to set up. Okay. All right. I will leave you with this. Brene Brown, gotta love Brene, right? She said this: compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to. And when they say yes, they mean it. They're compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. Oh my gosh. The whole concept of boundaries keeping you out of resentment. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say a boundary needs to come from love. You have to love yourself. You have to want to protect yourself. If you are running around creating, quote, boundaries because you hate the way other people are behaving, okay, and you're building up resentment. This is not a healthy boundary, my friend. I promise you that. Okay. Understand these distinctions and then know that when you're setting up boundaries, now you're acting out of love. Now that you're acting out of empowerment, now you're acting out of compassion. This is good. This is good. That's healthy. Okay. When you are trying to set up boundaries out of resentment and frustration and manipulation and all of those other negative things, I have news for you. Yeah, I'm not sure you're going to feel any better after implementing your, quote, boundaries than you did before. Come from a place of love and protection and respect for yourself. Now we're talking. Now you're golden. Okay, guys, where are we? We have about 10 minutes left. I want to mention that if you'd like to work with me, we have a couple of different options. So I have a 6-session package. You need to do all of those 6 sessions within a 2-month period, and that's $1,500. For some people, I work with them on an ongoing basis. So that's 4 sessions a month. They can be weekly. They don't necessarily have to. We can move them around, but that's on an ongoing basis. You need to sign up for a minimum of 3 months for that one, especially if people have an initiative like, I'm going to try and find a new job. I want to position myself for a better job, in the next 3 months. That's where this might make sense. Or I have a new manager where maybe these boundary issues, you need help sorting, is this a boundary issue or not? Or you need help, number one, define your boundaries. You need help even defining where your boundaries are. So that's where an ongoing coaching engagement for about 3 months or more might make sense. So that's $800 a month. And these involve, we don't just jump into it. I mean, we can, but there's some orientation, so let's set goals. Let's determine what we are going to be working on in particular, so that at the end of the coaching engagement, you can look back and say, yeah, no, this was good. Right? This is not like, this is not like open-ended therapy, right? Where you kind of go in and you talk about what's happening. No, this is, we have something we need to accomplish here. There's something that you want to learn. There's something that you're trying to implement where you need some support from a coach, okay. But I want us to be able to set goals so that you can look back and say, yes, that worked. That absolutely worked. The sessions are 1 hour, 1 hour each. And, I provide some email support. Usually what happens is the live coaching sessions are enough. They're enough. I give people enough to noodle on. They go and they do their work based on what they learned in those sessions. But, email is totally fine as well. And then they're conducted via Zoom video conference. Yes, you have to be comfortable talking to me live. I need to see your face. You need to see my face. There are exceptions. Some people I just talk to on the phone. That's fine. But I promise you this, when we do coaching via video conference, it is twice as effective as just doing it over the phone. Okay. So this is how I work. Here are some of the options available to you. And here's how you contact me. You can go to aureliancoaching.com. I've got lots of content there. If you want to work together, you don't have to do anything more sophisticated than shoot me an email. Just info@aureliancoaching.com. And I will respond, and we'll go from there. So that's the scoop. Let me see if there are any questions. I don't see any open questions. Nothing on the Q&A. Awesome, guys. Well, I am so happy that I got a chance to share this information. Contact me at info@aureliancoaching.com. And I am so happy to start the conversation with you and talk about boundaries or even other things around your career, or if you need help life coaching. Okay, guys, I will talk to you later. Have a great day. Bye-bye.